Thank you for joining our call today. Closed captioning is available and will begin in just a few minutes. The closed captioning is on the lower right of your Zoom screen. Great. See a few more people coming on. All right, shall we begin? Let's. Okay. Thank you again for joining our call today. We really appreciate you joining us. Good afternoon. My name is Vicki Pinella Bourns. I'm the director of the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our bi-weekly Utah Cultural Sector Community Update call. Before we start, I'd like to thank our partners who work with us to put this together: the Utah Department of Heritage and Arts, the Utah Cultural Alliance, Utah Humanities, Utah Museums Association, Utah Division of Arts and Museums, and local arts agencies from across the state. Thank you so much for your help. A few housekeeping items as we begin. Again, closed captioning is available. You press to access it from the bottom of your screen, click on closed captioning, and then click on show subtitles. So I wanted to let you know that President Adams was called away at the last minute and is unable to join our call today. But we are so pleased that Phil Dean, the State Budget Director and Chief Economist, will be on the call today. So if you will give me a moment, I want to introduce Phil properly. And I'd also like to thank Jill Love for her help in bringing our wonderful next guest to us today. So it's my honor to introduce Phil Dean, the State Budget Director and Chief Economist. In this capacity, he oversees preparation of the Governor's budget recommendations, as well as the Governor's Office of Management and Budget's revenue estimates and economic analysis. He also teaches economics as an adjunct professor. Prior to joining the Governor's Office of Management and Budget in 2013, Phil worked for the Utah Legislature, specializing in the areas of tax and education. He began his professional career working on the state budget at the California Department of Finance. Phil holds master's degrees in public administration and economics and a bachelor's degree in political science and Spanish. He is instrumental in crafting the governor's budgets and leading the state in fiscal decisions and economic forecasting. Phil, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're looking forward to hearing about recent economic projections and any other items you wish to share.
Thank you. Need to unmute there. I appreciate the chance to join with you for a few minutes today, and want to talk a little bit about the Utah economy and what's going on. We're actually, even though we're definitely facing challenges, we're in a lot better position. As I talk with budget officers throughout the nation, I'm just very glad I'm in the position I am compared to the position that many of the other budget officers are. So I want to start by sharing. I'm going to pull it up here. Is that showing up for everyone? I hope.
Yes,
some information that I presented this morning, the Economic Response Task Force that I was asked to share, showing taxable sales. So the state, one of the big revenue sources that we have is sales tax, and we track these taxable sales by sector, and it kind of gives us an indication of what's going on in the economy. If you look overall for both March 2020 and for April 2020, our taxable sales are similar to the 2019 levels. Now, in aggregate, that doesn't mean that everything's necessarily great, because we're, from a budget standpoint, during the legislative session. We're projecting growth to take place. And now that growth isn't taking place as we projected, but it's also, I expect April will probably be the hardest hit month. We'll see. That's when you had many of the most significant public health protocols in place and restrictions in place. But this chart I think is kind of interesting. Hopefully you've had a second to digest it now. I'll work through some of the pieces, and I'm sure the arts, entertainment, and recreation piece will interest you especially. But this just shows the March 2020 compared to March 2019. So that 1 month, the year in for 2020 compared to 19, that's in this lighter blue, or brighter, maybe I should say. And then this more gray blue compares April. And so sales tax data is filed with a 1 month lag. So April economic activity, those sales tax returns were due by the end of May. So we've just got this information, been compiling it in the last few days. So I'll start with one of the hardest hit sectors, accommodations. So reading the chart here, this shows April 2020 was down about 90% compared to April 2019 in terms of levels of taxable sales. Similarly, arts, entertainment, and recreation at about 75% decline in April 2020 compared to April 19. As again, in both those sectors, you see March had a significant impact, but not as big as the April impact, because for April, it is largely the whole month, where it was kind of the latter half of March when things with the pandemic started hitting. You see the personal care services category, restaurants, furniture and home furnishings, and electronics had very significant negative impacts. And these are some of our more sizable taxable sales. So this impacts the amount of revenue that we collect for the state. An interesting one that jumped out at me for our single largest taxable sales category is motor vehicles, where March had very significant declines of about 20%, but then saw a rebound in April to actually a small 1% year over year gain in April. Then looking at some of the other categories, this is where we see kind of the positive side offset. So there have been some very significant shifts in consumption that have taken place. It'll be interesting to see how many of these stick, how many of these are permanent, and how many are just temporary, related to either public health restrictions or just other things related to the pandemic. But we did see upticks in manufacturing, taxable sales, general merchandise. So here I think like your Walmarts, your Target stores, that saw over 20% increase in March, down to about 10% in April. Durable goods, food and beverage, so grocery stores, if you remember all the stockpiling people were doing back in March, you see that with nearly a 40% year over year increase, which is a really large increase for one of the larger sales tax categories. Not quite as large, but still in the range of between 15 and 20% year over year increase. Non-store retailers, and these are only the retailers that filed in both 19 and 20. We had some sales tax provisions take place in law for marketplace facilitators that would be excluded if they weren't in the 2019, which many of those types of non-store retailers weren't. But you know, Amazon or other large internet companies would be part of this. Again, a large shift that's taken place. I suspect in some of these categories, like your electronics, like some of your clothing, has shifted online rather than in the brick and mortar store. And then home improvement, garden, and building materials up 30% on a year over year basis. So those are some very sizable shifts in consumption that have taken place. I do think things ended up a lot better in April than we anticipated they might. So we may be down 0.5% or 1% on a year over year basis, but a very significant improvement, I think, over what a lot of people were expecting. The other piece of context I always like to add to this conversation is just that a lot of it is propped up right now by the federal government. that they enacted very significant fiscal stimulus. Here in Utah, we're over $11 billion that was allocated from the federal government. Depending on how things go in the next few months, we may end up somewhere in the range of $12 billion. So it's, you know, as some of these shifts start taking place, as we move back to more normalization in economic activity, and as there's less federal involvement going forward, at least right now, that's what it looks like. We'll see. The economy will have to kind of start standing on its own two legs here in the next couple months. I think by August or September is kind of the time frame I'm looking at, where you have some of the tax provisions, the unemployment insurance, provisions that will go away. A lot of the businesses, their paycheck protection program funds will have been used up in that time period. And so that'll be, I think, for me, give us a good sense of where we're at overall. The other thing I want to add is we do have on our website, and I'll post here in the chat, the link, this information and other information. So we're publishing it twice a month. We should have the mid-month version up by tomorrow. And so there's additional economic information. You can look at jobs, you can look at taxable sales. We're tracking traffic patterns to understand how that has changed, and we're still down about 13% overall on a statewide basis, but it varies by county in terms of our total traffic counts. Anyway, a lot of that economic information that we're tracking, and want to make sure that you know that's available to you as you kind of wonder what's happening overall in the economy. So I just put that link there in the chat, and if there's time, I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to remind people, if you have questions, to please put them in the Q&A. But I do have one question, is how has the Governor's Office of Management and Budget has worked with the legislature to update the 2021 state budget based on these new sales tax projections? Yeah,
so that's actually the meeting I was on just before this, that we worked on our revenue projections. So that's not public. You'll see that in the next couple of days as the legislature will be meeting later in the week in special session. So it's those, but I'll say those are incorporated into the decisions that the legislature is making. And you know, with that said, just remember that even if we stay flat, which sounds good, and it is good relative to where we thought we might be, it also means we were projecting growth in the budget for the coming year. And that's something that the legislature will have to deal with in special session to be able to balance the budget. So I don't have specific information I can give you directly, but be looking for that over the next couple of days. And we should have, and I'll grab the link and post it here too. We should have our monthly revenue update. So this is looking at our sales tax base, or what we collect revenue on, and it kind of shows up with a 1 month lag. We have more real-time collection, just the dollar amount of collection data, and that will probably also be up by tomorrow. Chance it may be up by the end of the day today, but likely tomorrow. That will be posted as well, and that'll at least give some indication for the current year where revenues are likely to end up at.
So, excuse me, the slide that you showed, is that on your website, or is that?
So it will be in this document that will be posted tomorrow, and I can send it.
Okay.
For this one slide for distribution to the group, but that, along with a lot of other information, will be available at that link that I put in the chat. By tomorrow sometime.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Is there any other questions? Let me just look around, see what I can see. So I bet you're very popular these days. Everyone calling you with questions on where are we?
Yeah, it's been busy, and it's, you know, we're looking at making CARES Act allocations, and that is something that we are recommending. And you'll see later in the week, the Utah Leads Together Volume 4 will be out, and in that you'll see recommendations that we have for making allocations of some of this federal money that we got for the arts sector. I think one important piece of that, just so you're aware of the discussion, and maybe you've already been involved in these discussions, but just that I think it's important to, as part of that process of receiving those funds, to give something back to the people of the state. And there are probably a number of different ways that could take place. But in all of these allocations, that's something that we've been really trying to do, is have this be something where we try to unite the state in different ways, where there has been significant impacts that we've all felt. But so kind of to help people out financially, but also in exchange, do things to try to bring the state together.
Okay, it looks like we might have one of our participants wanting to ask a question. Richard, it looks like your hand is up, but you're muted. Let me see, how do we do this? Emily, can you unmute him, or Richard, could you put your question in the Q&A?
Yes, I have unmuted Richard, or I've given you the ability to unmute yourself. But Richard, if you go to the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a microphone that has a slash through it. And you can unmute yourself from there if you still have a question.
Well, maybe we don't really have a question.
Okay, I'll just put his hand down then.
All right, thank you. Well, Phil, this has been really helpful, and I so appreciate you taking the time. I know you were just on a call. You've been on calls all day. You're probably working on another one, and to join us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time and you dropping what was on your plate to come chat with us. So thank you so much. Yes?
Glad to do it. And I did see the question there in the chat if you want me to respond.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
So I think we are likely to see budget cuts. So relative to the adopted budget. Now, how severe those are, that's the question. That's what we'll have to get into. But it's, even though the revenues are better than we anticipated, they're still going to be below the revenues that were projected back in February. So it's that issue of, we projected growth, and at least to date, we're not seeing growth. Even, we're essentially flat or maybe down just a teeny bit. But then when you compare that to the budget that was adopted at a higher level, right, the revenues are still coming in below. So there are a number of different approaches that the legislature can take to balance the budget. And I know they've looked at an extensive range of options, but we'll see where that all ends up.
What about for education? Do you think the legislature will reduce funding for education?
So I'm not sure specifically what they're going to do. So but I do know that was a high priority during the legislative session. I anticipate it will continue to be a high priority. All that being said, I think everybody is going to have to participate, especially since our income tax is one of our most volatile taxes. I want to come back a little bit maybe to some of the tax reform discussions over the last several years. And it's one of the challenges that we face as a state, that we have a sales tax that's not very well aligned with the modern economy. And we also have an income tax that is well aligned, but that is very volatile. So when things are good, it's really good. And when things are bad, it's really bad. And we're seeing that in terms of income tax not growing, like seeing larger impacts in income tax and in sales tax. And that's something that the legislature is going to have to figure out how to balance. So I do think there will be adjustments to the adopted budget. Remember that I wouldn't characterize, if the legislature comes in and adjusts budgets for the coming fiscal year, some people may call those cuts. If it's larger than the budget was last year, some may argue those aren't cuts, but however you look at it, I think there will be impacts, but I also think there will be significant effort to mitigate negative impacts on education.
Okay, thank you. There was a question regarding a percentage of growth you were projecting, but I'm wondering if you can parse that out into what were you projecting for taxes, excuse me, the sales tax revenue versus the income tax?
Yeah, and I don't have those growth rates in front of me. We were projecting an uptick in sales tax compared to where it had been because we were going to be, and we are picking up more of the remote sales. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I could also forward that along with the slide that I have, what the revenue forecast was back in February.
Oh,
But
great.
I don't remember the growth rates offhand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm just looking to see if we have one question, but I'll take that after because I think that's specifically for our agency. I don't see anything else.
We do
Going.
have one hand up, Vicki. Mearle
hand
Marsh.
up. Okay. Mearle, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me ask. Phil, I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you thought that impact was from the payroll protection. You talked about some impact from there that's being seen in there. Could you just articulate a little more about just go over that a little bit. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Paycheck Protection Program was a very large federal program. Our current estimate is that I think it was $5.3 billion roughly that had been received. We actually, my understanding was received higher awards, and then some companies decided, looking at all the things they may have to do, they decided not to take the money. But I think we're in the range of $5.3 billion that Utah organizations, companies, entities got under the federal Paycheck Protection Program. And my understanding of that is it was designed to cover about 2.5 months worth of payroll. And you look at the timing when a lot of entities started receiving that money, we're about 2.5 months after that. And so, you know, and some people were delayed, so it's not like a to the day kind of thing, but we're kind of to the end of people that received that PPP, as it's called, early on, using up that amount for their payroll. So it's one of the largest, I guess currently the largest federal program that's been supporting the economy.
Well, that input is purely in income tax, not necessarily sales tax. You're not seeing like an impact from the $1,200 or anything like that.
No, so I do think we are in sales tax. So that's like showing up to businesses, and then that shows up eventually as they pay their employees, shows up in income tax as those employees aren't laid off. So that like is there, but we don't see it directly. That's an indirect. So it's not $5 billion of income tax revenue, $5 billion that's going to translate into payroll, of which a portion of, you know, we'll see show up in income tax revenues. I do think there has been significant support in consumption. So talked about that motor vehicle sales. My guess would be that those direct IRS payments going out to households have had a significant impact on consumption levels. That I suspect some of that's going to cars and to the home improvement type things. I certainly know in my household that's what it went to. Went to home improvement, more yard outside, but yard projects that I've been lucky enough to work on this spring.
So then you project that will come to an end here then.
Yeah, and there's still discussion at the federal level. I don't know that people have spent all of that money that's come in, right? And we do have people transitioning back to work. So where we were on continued unemployment insurance claims, we peaked at about 105,000. Now we're at about 81,000. So we've seen that level come down as people go back to work. so, you know, all of these kind of, you have some that work one direction, some work the other direction, and there is discussion of additional federal stimulus, federal support of some sort. You know, that bill may or may not pass in the coming months, but at least where things stand right now, some of these pieces, federal support pieces, are going away or have a downward trajectory, and at the same time we have the more organic economic activity taking place on an upward trajectory. And it's that $5 billion was part of that $12 billion estimated amount.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. You have been a wealth of knowledge. Now we know who to call.
Well, you're welcome to call. I don't know how much knowledge I have, but I'm happy to share what I do have. And it's, like I said, a lot of this information, I'll send the information that we've talked about today. And who should I send that to, by the way? Should I just send it to Jill or to Emily?
Send it to Emily, and then
Okay.
we can get it out to
Okay,
everyone.
yeah, I'll send it to Emily and she can distribute it. And there will be a lot more information like that available tomorrow at that link that was posted before.
That's great. Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All
We
right.
really appreciate your time.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
All right, we are back. Let me, what I'd like to do is I'd like to provide a few updates and then answer a question that has come through. And then hopefully we will still have time for a discussion we were hoping to have on this call. So I wanted to provide some updates from the Department of Heritage and Arts. Many of you heard the governor's announcement last week that Dustin Jansen, Director of Indian Affairs, and Nubia Pena, Director of Multicultural Affairs, will report directly to the governor and be part of his senior leadership team. This means they will meet with the governor regularly as part of his team and have direct access to him. You know, we're so happy that the governor recognizes how valuable their input will be to his agenda. And they'll still lead their divisions, which remain a part of the Department of Heritage and Arts. And there was more good news. I think Phil mentioned this, that it was reported that 25,000 people dropped off the unemployment rolls last week in Utah. More people are getting off the rolls, so the economy is starting to stabilize. Hospitalizations also remain stable. And this week, the legislature will convene in special session to address budget shortfalls and the appropriation of CARES Act dollars. So this is going to be one of the biggest special sessions the legislature has ever requested. There's over 20 legislative items will be addressed along with the budget. And we are hopeful there will be CARES dollars available to help many of you and our constituents in the nonprofit world. Our legislators are cognizant of the cultural sector's needs, and they have been working to find ways to help. So regarding, there was a question about wild predictions on this point, our estimate for our agency's budget for fiscal 21. And frankly, until the session is over with, I really don't know. I think many of you know that we were asked to put together 2%, 5%, and 10% reductions for our agency, as was every single agency within the state. We did provide that. We are just hoping for the best, and we will use whatever we have as well as we can. And we really tried to make sure that the grants monies would be maintained as closely to the levels that we had anticipated as we can. That was our main priority as we put our budgets together. So I wanted you to know that. We were hoping we could have, and we're going to do a little test here, a conversation about how museums, arts, humanities, and cultural organizations can provide community healing. And we're going to try a few things. We will do some unmuting and have participants share their thoughts and ideas. And I also want, as I provide some questions, we're going to do two things. We're going to do a poll through this Zoom survey option that I would love for you to respond to, and then we'll share as a whole group to see what people are thinking about. And I really do want to unmute people and hear some of your stories, some of your ideas regarding this discussion about community healing. First of all, I would like you to think about, and feel free again to write this in the chat, what does community healing mean for you? When you think of the word healing, what comes to mind? And feel free to just type that into the chat. I'm going to see if I can see this chat. There was an article I wanted to bring to your attention recently about how the arts can heal. And we've seen research in this. Many of you know that your activities really bring people hope, they bring them joy, they get them out of their own self and more engaged with the world. So what I see is strengthening bonds between community members. So let's do the first poll. Have you or your organization engaged in any activities specifically to provide healing for your community? Emily, can you pull that one up for us? Now, can I see you do this or can I not?
Yes, you can.
Oh, I can. Yay. All right. So if you could all take a moment and just share with us whether you have or have not. And then if you have, let us know if you utilize artifacts, music, dance, poetry, visual arts, literature, history, or other methods. Looks like we have here from Marcy. In the present and going forward, we're making sure our online films represent people of color on film and by filmmakers. Nice. And I'm also wondering, I didn't know that the polls was all one, but so if you have partnered with other organizations to do this work, let us know. And I'll give you just a minute or two to fill in the survey.
So far we have 16 people have answered the survey.
Great. So let's look at the results quickly while we're.
Okay, we've got we do have a few other people who are.
Oh, are they working on it? Okay.
They are.
Oh, good. Jody Graham noted that they have a series of community conversations coming up, and there is a link in the chat that you can click on to find out more information about those. Wendy Hassan in Cache County wrote, we featured other arts organizations in daily arts activities, and now we're planning a series of small, physically distanced community concerts. Lisa Sewell noted, we've seen a lot of healing through Festival Vibes Friday, their online content to present artistic content from the festival throughout June. With the number of festivals and events simply closing their doors, it's been great to see the number of artists wanting to engage with this program. And Jody Graham from Utah Humanities provided another link.
All right, it looks like we have our poll results in,
Dun, da, da, da.
and let's share those results.
Great. Okay, so 64% have said yes, and they've used a number of different disciplines or activities. So those of you who have, if there's anybody who has not had a chance to respond in the chat or would like to share some of what you've done with the rest of the group, raise your hand or let us know in the chat and we'll be happy to unmute you. So this is a test, this unmuting and trying this, and so
Yes, the raise your hand button, for those of you who don't know, is at the bottom of your screen. It should be in between the closed captioning button and the chat button.
okay. Marcy, do you want to talk about, you got on here, film is the other for questions. Salt Lake Film Society is hosting virtual reality film Traveling While Black. Oh, this is what you did do. You did this in October through December of 2019. That was a fabulous exhibit. I was able to participate in that and it was very powerful. I tell you, this is hard to facilitate conversations through Zoom.
Oh, it looks like it is very hard, but you're doing a really good job, Vicki.
So, does anyone want to share what's worked or what things you'd like to try that maybe you haven't been able to?
It looks like Marcy also put in the chat that Traveling While Black is digitally available right now.
I would recommend you all check it out if you haven't already. So let me shift gears a little bit. I think you heard Phil mention that the legislature is concerned and wanting to provide resources for the arts and cultural community. And they also want they want us, our museums, arts organizations, humanities, cultural organizations, to provide a service for our communities to help with healing, to help with tourism, to help bring people out into the community again. So I'd like you to think about what comes to mind that you might be able to do to help with these initiatives. Also, if Wendy or Lisa wants to add to your comments, we'd be happy to unmute you. What has your organization done that's made a real difference in an individual's life or a community that you would want to share? Well, I know there's still people out there because I can see the participants. Let's see. Kirsten Allen has said that Torrey House Press has produced, is it chap books with submissions by community members, and this might be a time to do that again. Could you let us know? I don't know what a chap book is. Unmute
Kirsten,
her.
yeah, is it Kirsten Allen?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, she meant poetry or no?
Sometimes poetry comes, chapbooks are poetry, but what we've done is, a chapbook is just like a small run, a small print run, but it's usually also a small book. And sometimes it's, you know, it's soft bound, but sometimes it's just like saddle stitched or you know, stapled. So a few years ago, we did a book called Breathing Stories, where we solicited community members to share their stories, their clean air stories. And we've also done another one called Sights and Sightlines, where we invited people to dive into the ecological or human history of a certain place in Salt Lake City and just kind of explore that and share that. So I think, you know, this sounds like a good opportunity to kind of say, to do something around community stories around pandemic, around maybe even around the value of arts in these times of trouble. I've just started thinking about that, but you've got me rolling, and
All right. Well, great.
it'd be really helpful.
Good. Thank you for that. Sarah Gibbs from Alta Community Enrichment says that they've been told that we created community when there was no community. We encouraged creativity when people were lacking inspiration. Thank you. That's great. And Sarah, if you want to share any more about that, I'd be happy to unmute you.
Looks like I've.
Yeah. Oh, am I
There you
unmuted?
go. Yes, you
Yeah,
are.
Yeah, we received amazing feedback from our community, like to the point where it's like amazingly surprised at how people reacted to us continuing events in a virtual world, and not only providing events and ideas for people to do, but also paying a very nominal amount for people to like make videos for us, whether it was for bread making or ski tuning or kids art. And that was, you know, we just would get emails and texts over and over about like thanking us for, you know, creating that community and continuing ACE. And I've had many people also say that, you know, sorry, I haven't attended any events, but I really appreciate that they're there.
Yeah.
And that's been nice, because I've thought about like whether we're actually having an impact still, and apparently we still are. So that's exciting.
That's wonderful. Yeah. No, that is great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. I'm glad I figured out how to chat. I'm on my phone and I usually do this on my computer.
Oh,
how
yes.
do I chat?
I don't know. I don't know how to do that. See, you'll have to show us. You'll have to tell us how. Because I do it on the computer
you have to
too.
tap the screen, and then there's chat at the bottom, and the Q&A as well.
Okay. All right.
We're still learning.
We are all still learning. It's 4:15. It's almost time. Well, it is time to end, but I just want to share this. Lisa Sewell from Utah Arts Festival said, "For me, it's been incredibly soothing to participate with other community members each Friday as I tune in to a Zoom dinner view dialogue with Paisley Rectal. I feel more connected." Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. And we are so fortunate to have Paisley Rectal as our poet laureate here at the state of Utah. Wonderful poet and a wonderful teacher, and the outreach she brings is really incredible. So we're going to continue with these calls every other week now at 3:30 p.m. on Mondays. And again, we will post the recordings and notices on our website. I'm just so grateful that you're all here, and we all need to be resilient for the work ahead, and to be resilient to care for ourselves and our communities and our organizations. So thank you for your courage and your determination as we deal with COVID-19 and we work for social justice. So I want to wish you stamina, resiliency, and creativity, and stay well. Bye now.